Thank you, and welcome everybody to a session that we have this morning where we are launching a new resource that we think will be valuable to schools and trusts across England and beyond. This has taken a good few months to prepare, but this is actually sort of us trying to collate all the work, all the good practice that we've seen working with schools and trusts across the country for multiple years. And the reason we started doing this was we felt that stakeholder feedback is something that can be done very well. It can be tremendously impactful, but it can also be a useless activity. And we've seen trusts go through an evolution in how they use it, delivering far more value to them. And we feel that anyone, I see many Edurio partners and customers here, and I also see faces from other organizations that we don't work with. This is a resource that is intended for anyone in the sector to use because not everybody will need or want to work with an Edurio survey, but we feel that anyone in the sector should think carefully about how they use stakeholder feedback to benefit the most from it. So what we'll do today is we'll have a little bit of conversation with Gopi Block first, who is from Avanti Schools Trust and has been a contributor to this resource hub. Then Imanta, who's our insights manager and is the main author of this project, will talk through what you can find, what the overall structure is, and how to use it for yourself. And then we'll go into a little bit of a discussion and questions or comments from everybody here. And what I will say is this is intended as a living resource hub. So this is the first version, and you are the first group ever to experience this resource. And the only thing we would ask from you is to give us feedback. We are an organization devoted to feedback, so we try and work with that. But if anything, as you explore it afterwards or in the session, is confusing, hard to understand, or if anything is super important and you want more on it, we will keep developing this over the next months and years. And so this will never be a finished document, but it will hopefully serve the needs of any education organization looking to get the most out of stakeholder feedback. So before we go into the detail of what you'll be able to find and access, I'd love a little bit of conversation with Gopi. Gopi, thank you so much for joining us. You've been a key part and inspiration to us in your work at Avanti. So thank you for that, and your feedback on this hub has been tremendously valuable. We'll have a little bit of conversation as to why this is important, but could you first tell a little bit about your background prior to working in education and your role at the moment, which is head of organizational culture, which is a very exciting role that I think many other trusts should consider as well. So Gopi.
Thank you so much, Ernest, and lovely to be here. And thank you for the few months that we've worked together. It's been a real pleasure and delight. My name is Gopi Block. I am the head of organization culture at Avanti Schools Trust. But as you may be able to tell from my accent, I am not native to this delightfully warm country. I moved here from the States, and I have a master's in organization development, which I got from American University. And what piqued my interest to get into this was as I was going through university and noticing there were certain projects and teams that I worked on that worked really well, and certain groups that just really didn't, because either myself or someone else let everyone else do all the work and then tried to take credit. And so it was just noticing as I entered the workforce, there's certain groups and teams and organizations had certain approaches that worked and certain ones that didn't. And I thought, oh, that would be interesting to study. And it turns out that there's a lot of studies around it and a ton of data work. And so I studied specifically this, how organizations, communities, and teams grow And the key instigator for that is feedback. So it led to me getting a role with Avanti Schools Trust, which is an educational group that is trying to do something unique in education. The piece that the essence of my role there is that about 70% of planned change fails, and my role is to try to help us be in the 30%, to be data informed and research informed. And so that's kind of the essence of what I do.
Thank you so much, Gopi. And this session is all about using stakeholder feedback well. So can I ask, from your perspective, from a school trust perspective, but also your past work on organizational design, why does feedback matter? Why is it important in running the organization?
Yeah, feedback is the essence of getting better. I mean, it's the heart of it. In my relationship with my wife, she reminds me constantly of the wonderful things that help me get better, and I genuinely wouldn't without hearing that from her. So it's personal. Our team, me, I as a line manager, unless I understand the things that I am doing that are helpful to those that I serve, I may get it wrong. As an organization, we have parents, we have students, we have staff that we engage with constantly. And when we try something, we don't know if it works without asking. And so feedback is at the heart of learning. It is for students that are in our classrooms, but it's really, really apparent for the adults also, and really important for the parents that we engage with, that we listen to what they're saying, because they're actually telling us what they want and how we can help make things better.
Thank you. Using feedback in a relationship, that's a brave step. We don't recommend people using feedback when they're in the passenger seat in a car, but other than that, every other bit can be improved by feedback.
Yeah. I haven't given my wife a survey yet, but I definitely do the listening part in person.
And we talk a little bit about the importance from the perspective of us as organizational leaders in getting better and finding ways to improve our work. But what about the perspective of the staff, pupils, and parents in a trust? So one of the things that we see sometimes, we work with a trust where they were doing feedback all the time, and they were getting like 50% of staff members participating, 40%. And then over 3 years of thinking about this strategically, they started getting 90%, 85% of staff sharing their views. So there's something shifting in the staff members themselves taking part in that process. So why is it important for staff, pupils, and parents to feel heard? How big is that a part of the stakeholder feedback element?
I mean, it's absolutely everything. I advocate, and we were trained in my profession of supporting organizations and teams. Don't ask for feedback if you're not going to do anything with it. It's the most frustrating thing, and it's better to be viewed as just a stubborn group of people that are set in their ways than people that are pretending to listen to you and then doing whatever they want anyways. That in and itself kind of creates even more frustration, hurt, and pain, which creates greater resistance the next time you try to engage or to create a change. And change manifests with energy and trust. Trust is the currency of change. So if, for example, we're trying to implement a new well-being policy in our trust to try to decrease the amount of time that teachers spend providing feedback for homework, but we have to engage with the parents who may interpret that as, oh, my student's not learning as much because they're not getting as much feedback. And so we have to be cognizant of all three areas, and the ability for them to hear us and for us to engage with their concerns will give us enough trust to successfully manifest it. And if we're not able to listen and not able to engage, or do it just as a checkbox exercise, but then go through with it, we'll absolutely feel that the next time we try to implement something, because there'll be huge amounts of resistance and frustration built into the system that just will pull us to a halt. And the last thing we want is for the operation to be successful, where we give high fives, you did a survey, we heard everything, but that the patient died, and we don't really worry about the patient. So we want the operation to be successful and for all of us to be healthier and better for it in the long run.
Thank you. And I have one question, which is perhaps a little bit complex, but something that we had a session at the CST governance conference a couple of weeks ago, and Alison from Nova took part in that as well. And so one of the questions that came up in that was, okay, so trusts are multi-layered organizations. So there's a trust consisting of many schools. And something that I know is on the minds of a lot of trust leaders is, what should we do as a trust, and what should we leave for the schools to worry about? Can you share a little bit about your perspective from Avanti perspective, but also any reflections thinking about these multi-layered organizations? Is feedback a central game, or is that delegated to the schools?
Yeah, absolutely. So feedback is everyone's game. I mean, regardless of where you're at, there's pieces that we can all learn in it. As a member of a central team, we have 12 schools in our Avanti family. It's really important for us at our level to do the metaphor that comes to mind is kind of the annual health check that you'd go to. And that's kind of a broad survey just to get a sense from across the board how everyone's doing with their basic health. Now, in one of those screens, if you go to one, or the one that I've been to, if something comes up there or something is noticed, then you'd go and do a little more in-depth one. And that enters a realm of partnership with the local school. So they will have more expertise and understanding in context for their situation than we will. So it becomes our role to support and engage them. Now, within that school, they may have teachers that then are highlighted that need to explore a certain shift or change in what they're doing. And again, those teachers will have more expertise than even the school will in their situation. So it's about cascading and identifying where and how to support change for it to be most meaningful. But we do see our role as guiding those conversations, not enforcing, but putting it onto the table and creating the right circumstances for change to emerge. And so at that level, the trust, I think, is essential to starting those conversations, but it's really important to engage all levels in participating in it, because we cannot realistically create a change in a classroom. That needs to happen with the teacher there. So how we partner throughout the process is essential for that.
Thank you, Gopi. Yeah, one of the things that we talk a lot about is this idea of central shared vision and values and strategy and school-driven implementation. So finding the common voice, which is the purpose of the trust, the shared language, but then making sure the schools are able to deliver on their priorities. Thank you so much, Gopi, for sharing some of these insights. And I'd like now to ask Imanta, who's our Insights Manager, to essentially talk through the Resource Hub, talk through the process that we are suggesting is good practice to follow with stakeholder feedback to do it well, and we'll then return to a discussion. So if you have any questions while Imanta is talking, please feel free to share them via the chat, and we'll be able to pick them up either in the chat or after that. Imanta, thank you so much for joining.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all here. Very excited to be with you today. Thank you, Ernest. Thank you, Gopi, for that great kind of contextual start to what we've done with this resource. Because at Aduryo, we really feel that feedback, and especially quality feedback, can lead to action, and that anyone can really become an evidence-informed leader driving quality school improvement for your schools. At this point, I'll invite you to take a look at the new resource that we have available. So you can snap a picture with your phones of the QR code, or enter into your browser go.aduryo.com/feedback, and you'll be able to look at the new resource, kind of follow along with what I'll be sharing with you today. And we'll give you access to this code again at the end of the presentation. So if you haven't managed to take a picture of it yet, then that's no problem. If you're new to this process and you're kind of feeling your way through the stakeholder feedback cycle, we do suggest starting at the beginning and following through the steps. But also, if you're here looking for some specific answers to your current needs, then do feel free to jump around the hub and find the things that you're looking for. And what we are showing here today is based on our strategic feedback survey cycle. And like Gopi and Ernest mentioned a bit before, we truly believe that collection and feedback itself isn't the thing that's going to give us the lasting organizational change. It's the people in this process. Teaching and learning is a people process. The school community is about its people. So it's the people working with the data who will bring it to action and be able to make the change. And we also realize that, life is messy. So this process, as beautiful as it looks, designed by our wonderful designers, as a very linear process, it's not going to be like that. It's going to have some bumps along the way, but by planning the steps and following the key elements of each step in the process, we can make progress, and we'll get a little bit more kind of used to the flow as we learn and grow. So let's jump right in. The first step of the strategic feedback cycle is about setting goals. And when we think about the goal, it can seem kind of repetitive and vague to say, oh, we need a goal for this. But that is important, because when we think about the survey and what we want to find out, we should have a clear understanding why we're doing this. We want to have that answer. Okay, why are we deciding to dedicate resources, time, energy at this point to focus on this topic? And we want this why to be connected with your organization's vision of a quality education, and also a part of your school improvement plan. We don't want surveys to be just kind of something that's like removed from everything that we're doing in our daily work. We want it to be aligned and in track with where we're going. And once we've figured and kind of defined that why for ourselves, we can start thinking about the other two elements of this goal, what it is that we want to find out. Are we looking for, something diagnostic, something broad? We want to figure out the experience of our stakeholders. Or are we looking to explore a topic in greater depth? So we're diving into a specific topic. Maybe we have a hypothesis that we're trying to uncover and a problem that we want to solve. So we need to figure out what's going on there. And then once we figure out what it is we're looking for, we can think about the who. Who is involved in this? The key stakeholder group that we're trying to help, to reach, to engage. And like Gopi said already in the beginning, the staff, pupils, and parents being the key stakeholders in this education community, they're very closely connected. So in this goal, we have to keep in mind, okay, if we focus our efforts in one group, how will that affect the other two groups? What changes may we see if we do something here? What will the others start saying? And we just have to keep in mind that this is a very closely interconnected process. And the focus of the goal is that we start with the end in mind. What is our vision? Where are we taking our organization? Having this goal be that communicating tool that we use to share with others, that driving force to keep our energy going, so that we don't get stuck in that in-between land. Many times we may feel that like, okay, we did the survey, we clean our hands, we put the information to the side, we asked them what they wanted to, we asked our respondents what they thought, we've done our job. But that's not where the process ends. We have to take this information, we have to go and do something with it, show our respondents that yes, we are listening to their voice matters, and we can do something with it. And once we've carried out and set up this goal for ourselves, we're ready to carry out the survey. And the carrying out of the survey has 3 phases, from the plan to the design and the running of the survey. When we start planning what we're going to do with the survey, we have to look at who's going to be on our team, who will be the main change agents working on this project. We have to set out some logistics and get things in order, and of course, consider the timeline. So when you're forming your team, we're looking at being clearly aligned with one another, dividing responsibilities and tasks among who's going to take on what, and making sure that we're all looking in the same direction, looking at the same vision with that same goal in mind. And we may also have to think about what are the other touch points, maybe outside the team, where we'll have to kind of inform stakeholders. So that might be making sure that the executive team is informed, checking off budgetary constraints, those sorts of things, informing staff, parents, and pupils when necessary to kind of get their feedback or their feel for what's going on. Then we can start thinking about the nitty-gritty, the logistics of it all. And the first thing is to choose what kind of survey tool you're going to use. Are you going to go the DIY route with kind of Google Forms and SurveyMonkey, or are you looking to collaborate with an external partner like us at Adurio? And this will definitely change and impact the work and the process going forward. So if you're choosing to do it yourself, you'll have to do a lot more of the survey design aspect. Working with Adurio, you know, we have our surveys ready to go, and you can kind of pick and choose just the details of it all. And the key thing is, when planning how to carry out your survey is to find the right time to take this survey. And we suggest late autumn and late spring as the two best times to run surveys. Late autumn is a good time to get respondent feedback, because you've allowed your stakeholders to kind of settle into the school year. So if you have any newcomers as staff or new pupils in your organization, you've given them some time to kind of gain experiences, glean feelings of how they feel in the environment, so that they can actually give you something to say in their responses. And late spring, on the other hand, is a good time to run surveys if you're planning to make some changes for the upcoming school year. So you can run a survey in the late spring, make your analysis and action plan, get that in place during the summer term, and then hit the ground running in the next term, fall term, to kind of get things in place already. When it comes to designing surveys, that's where we like to say that we know what we're talking about, and in our hub we have given you all of our best tips and tricks. But the main question that we make sure that people understand is that when you're writing questions and responses, make sure that this question is valuable to you and that the respondent can give a meaningful answer. So what does that mean? If a question is valuable to you, that means we're going back to the goal that we set in the beginning of the process, and we're making sure that this question is related to that goal, that we are finding the answers that we need to understand this topic better. Many times when we have surveys, we start thinking, oh, that would be a nice question to ask, or, oh, I would love to ask them that question. And if we keep kind of giving into that urge, the survey is very long and we're very unfocused with the data that we collect. So focusing on the goal, focusing on what it is you need to find out, making sure that the question is valuable to you when you think about what data you're going to get from it. And then making sure that the respondent can give a meaningful answer means thinking about who it is you're asking the question to. Are we asking in the simplest way possible? Are we thinking about the language that we're using, kind of avoiding jargons and so forth? And also making sure that the respondent has had the experience in this topic to be able to say something about it. And then the structure of the survey is equally important. If we don't think about how we're going to order the questions or the length, then we risk respondents not filling out the survey in its entirety. Think about, the questions or parts of the survey that are most important to you, most related to the goal. In a sense, if we could only ask one question from our respondents, which one would we want to make sure that they get to? We'll put that kind of towards the beginning of the survey. We should make sure that we group topics and questions around the same theme, so that respondents aren't jumping around and getting confused about what it is that they're responding to. And then the length. The shorter the better, of course, because we don't want to overburden our respondents. And what we find is that the longer the survey, the higher the risk that a respondent will drop off, will not complete the survey in its entirety, which means that in the end, you're working with incomplete data that won't be as reliable as you would have liked. And then the final phase of this carrying out the survey is the running of the survey, launching, monitoring, and closing it. And the key phrase here is to communicate. When you launch your survey, communicate it to your respondents, invite them to come fill out your survey, explain to them why you want them to fill out the survey, what you hope to do with the answers that you collect. While you're monitoring how people are filling in the survey and the response rates, if they're getting higher and higher, which we hope they will, use the tools in your toolbox, use various channels and send out reminders, get social helpers involved to get people to come to the survey to fill it out. So if you're working a survey at a trust level, get people in each school to help get people to respond. Start out even a friendly competition amongst groups to see which group can get the most respondents fastest, et cetera, et cetera. And at the close of your survey, make sure to communicate once again to say thank you to your respondents. Give them some general timeline tips of like how you will start analyzing the survey and when they can expect to see some sort of analysis from you. And then we get to that grand moment of looking at your results. What do we see in the responses from your stakeholders? Let's start analyzing the results. And at first we want to take a look at the results from kind of like a bird's eye view. What is the big picture that we see? And then we want to start filling in the context. The context of your school, of your stakeholders, the experiences they've had, that you've had, the things that you've implemented in the past. All of that will fill in the kind of missing spaces so that you can draw sound conclusions about your results and that you can have as much energy as possible to go into the action phase. So we're asking ourselves the questions about these initial findings. Which areas do we see that are the strongest? Which are the weakest? The strongest ones will be the good ones to say, okay, we can look here for best practice that we can share across our groups. The weakest ones will be probably the ones that we add to our priority list of exploring further, of understanding, okay, what's going on here? What do we need to help? We can also compare the groups, the respondent groups, how they respond. Which group maybe has the highest results? If we're looking from a trust level, is there a school that jumps out with higher results than other schools? Why could that be? Same with lowest results. Is there a pupil group that kind of jumps out as being a little bit lower than other pupil groups? Why could that be? And we also want to consider, are there any surprising results? And this is a very important aspect when you're looking through the results of your survey. Is there anything that surprises you? Because this most likely indicates that there is some sort of misalignment between the leadership team or the team that's leading this project and your respondents. And at first that can be a little bit startling. It can be a little bit catching you off guard. But if we take note, what are these areas that surprise us? And we ask ourselves why, we can kind of start uncovering what are the areas that we do maybe need to focus on our communication and get more aligned with our stakeholders about these topics. And then finally, going into what are the most important results. And this really feeds back into the goal that we set out at the beginning. Why, the what, and the who. Are you finding the answers that you were looking for at the beginning? Are the results pointing you in the direction where you need to look to make sure that you're in the right direction, focusing your energy to get to action? And then we can start filling in context. So the data that you have available in your organizations is very plentiful, I am sure. So here are just some examples of what else you can look at to kind of get a better idea of, okay, now we have one voice or a group of voices from our stakeholder feedback survey. What else should we look at to fill in the context? So this could be focused discussion notes that you have, any kind of pupil attendance data, staff turnover rates, parent-teacher, parent-school communication strategies, whatever else you need to explore to kind of get a better idea of what's going on around this topic to understand it more fully. And then by the end of analysis, you should be ready to use the data to initiate change. So you've looked at the results, you've kind of organized it for yourself, you've added your context to it. You can draw these sound conclusions based on your goal. Why did we ask these questions? Why are we focusing on this? Did we get the answers that we were looking for? Is it going to impact the stakeholders that we set out to impact? And you should be ready to say, okay, I have a clear idea of what I want to look at next. And that takes us then into the final stage, the final step of taking action. Or taking action, this is again 2 phases. The first one is to talk about it, to communicate about what you found out in the results. Say thank you to your stakeholders for participating, for taking the time out of their schedules to give you this information that you're working with. Make sure that you summarized the strengths and the areas of improvement that you saw and analyzed in the results. And here we're trying to be as objective as possible. It can be a little bit tempting to defend what you see, and especially around the weaknesses or areas of improvement that you want to defend your position. But let's be humble, let's be candid about what we see, and thank them for being open about what they were feeling. And at this point, we want stakeholders to understand and get that support in feeling that the data is valid, and that they see a clear connection to themselves. So we should once again explain to them how the survey process happened. How did we collect this data? How did we analyze it? Who was involved in the analysis? And help them see that, yes, this is a mirror of their experience. This is their voice speaking, that they are a part of this data, and that we're here to work together to figure out what to do next to make sure that we're all aligned. And be prepared for different reactions. So you've already had that chance to settle and to sit with the results. Give them that space for your stakeholders to kind of air their observations and feelings about what they see in the data. And then we're ready to figure out what are the next steps. Where are we going to focus our priorities for action? And at this point, we have to remember that saying yes to one thing means saying no to another thing. We cannot do it all. We need to prioritize. So the strategy that we're putting forth is that you look at the priorities that you've listed based on your conclusions from your analysis, and you look at what you have solutions for and what you don't have solutions for, and look for those areas where you will find the biggest impact. So make those your priority, where you feel that you can see the most impact for your stakeholders and the group that you're targeting. Keeping in mind, of course, if there's anything urgent that you should address in a more timely manner. And then we're setting up a timeline, thinking about the time periods in which we need to work. So the short term, the medium term, the long term. Thinking about quick wins, which will really keep that energy going, which will give that satisfaction and feeling of, oh, okay, things are actually happening. We said that in the survey, and we see that things are being done about it. But combining that with your strategic planning, your long-term vision, your school improvement plan. Planning in milestones. So how are you going to measure that work is happening? What kind of data will you have to collect along the way to see that change is happening in your organization? And of course, then setting deadlines, because if we don't have some sort of accountability in place, we won't be in the process and actively working towards it. So setting some deadlines that you can check in together as a team, together as stakeholders, to see and evaluate that progress is actually happening. And once again, we have to include and share with our stakeholders what we're working on. So we want to say and feed their feedback once again back to them and say, okay, in your survey, you said this, and this is what we did about it. And by showing these sort of visual ways of how their feedback impacts your work planning, we can give them that, our stakeholders, the satisfaction that their voice really matters, and that next time when you ask them to share their feedback with you, they'll be more willing to do so. You'll face less resistance, and you'll have more buy-in, and hopefully a higher response rate, because people will say, oh yes, I remember that they actually did use our survey results for something. And then the cycle keeps on going. So we invite you to keep using evidence, review the process as it goes on. So after you've done one survey, stop, take a break, and review. How did it go? What went well? What do we need to work on next time? But this is also that invitation of, okay, this is our first survey. What will our next survey be able to show us? Do we want to see and measure a benchmark with our own results for next year? Do we want to see progress? How will we continue this work with evidence, and how will we continue implementing it into our planning. And every so often, come back with your team and evaluate how did that go. So measure your progress. Are we reaching the milestones? How has time been managed? How has collaborative work been going on? And finally, going back to that collective vision, is this still your priority? It might be, like I said in the beginning, life is messy and priorities change, have to change, possibly because of different pressures. If that is your decision, then that's okay. But make sure that you have the data and the alignment across your team to understand that this is the decision and this is the direction we have to go. So make sure that you're continually checking in on that aspect of it. And then we hope that with the tools that we give you in this new guide and the steps that we've lined out for you, that collecting stakeholder feedback won't be a daunting task, but will be kind of a part of your everyday work and the work that you're doing in your organizations, to integrate it into what you want to achieve with the work that you're doing. So I'll put the QR code and the link to the hub once again. There are materials and templates for you to use. So presentations, worksheets that you can download and adapt for your needs. Use them for each step of the process to get your team on board, to get come together to analyze your results and so on and so forth. So we really hope that you'll find it useful. And we'll, like Ernest said, we invite you to share your feedback with how you use it, and any changes or things that you would like us to create in the future. So thank you very much. And yeah, back to you, Ernest.
Thank you, Amanda, for sharing that. And I hope we haven't scared too many people off the idea of doing feedback, because I mean, it's hard. And one of the things that we try to do with this is to make sure that trusts are not, or the school leaders and trust leaders are not in a reactive space where, say, the board said we need a staff survey, and then we've done it, and we've done staff well-being, or we work on topics like equality, diversity, and inclusion, or safeguarding, and frequently people don't know where to start. So it's natural for them to say, "Oh, I guess we need to gather some evidence," and it is a dangerous place to be, where we say we've done a survey, therefore we've done EDI or we've done safeguarding. It is a start of the process, and a complex process, and I don't think a lot of this is extra work, because many of you will have school improvement processes that are evidence driven, that are considered on an annual basis. So a lot of this is about integrating feedback that you gather in a coherent school improvement process. And what I will say, just kind of to wrap this up, is before we open this to a little bit of a discussion, is so as Amanda said, there are templates for you to use. There is text. Over time we'll add video bits for the sections. So this is an element that is open for anyone to use, anyone in the sector, for free at no cost, whether you're an Adurio customer or not. You're able to adapt any of the resources, change as you see fit. The only things that we ask is, one is that you attribute this work to Adurio if you use it, and that you don't use it in a commercial capacity. So you don't make money off the resources. So this is given to the community with the expectation that it is a resource for your use, for your school improvement, and do feel free to share it with others as you see fit. So that's a little bit about how you can use that. Now, I'm going to ask Gopi, as you've been a key contributor to this, to just share your perspective. You've seen there's far more than what's been presented. There's a lot of it, and it can feel overwhelming. So what would be your guidance for the trust and school leaders on this call, how you can use some of these resources, or how you can think about the process overall?
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me back in, and thanks, Amanta, for sharing all of kind of the roadmap. It does seem like a lot, and so I don't occupy a leadership role in that I don't have authority within my trust, but I have influence. So I see myself as a change agent, and the biggest support I offer to the leaders is to really break it down and view it step by step, because it seems like a lot, but it's actually a very logical thing. We do it every day. We're growing every day, we're receiving feedback, so if you have an assumption or you want to make a change, it's really just pausing and thinking, will I get this right? And asking a few questions. And so I really just try to remind them to do it step by step. The resources are absolutely terrific over here. I had the privilege of working with the Jurio, and they've asked me not to do anything to say any nice things about them, just to tell you about data, but I do have to appreciate them for the support that they've offered us in terms of how they've enabled us through their systems to really, the hardest thing with a ton of data is to get confused and lost with it. And the simplest thing is, the hardest thing to get is very clear data, and they provide that opportunity. So my offering is step by step. The resource is absolutely incredible. I will be using it within my trust to help people and the leaders understand where they are in the system and structure of it. But yeah, that's kind of what my primary suggestion is.
Thank you, Gopi, and well, thanks for the kind words. How do you turn this from a one-off exercise into an ongoing process? Can you share just a little bit of your journey? Because I know you've been very careful to not overwhelm people, to think about it in a structured way. So can you just share a little bit from your perspective there?
Yeah, so we've been having some really meaningful conversations about how we know things will change. So I was invited into the trust to really help them change their culture, which is one of the hardest things to change in any group, team, organization along the way. So no small task. And when you engage with that, you have to engage with it at a vision level, at a long-term level. You can't really do that by making small pieces. So what we've implemented in our trust is an annual cycle where we'll be using the same questions in the autumn of every year to explore if the changes that we've made based off of the evidence and data we've heard actually had the impact we want. So there's one thing to say, hey, this is really telling us that our approach to homework isn't working. We make some significant changes, and then we check again next year if the data has informed us that the impact has been positive. Maybe we've put something in that absolutely made it worse, and the only way we'll know is if we've kind of gone through that cycle. So by creating a pattern and inviting people into it, we're trying to create a habit of learning and create a learning community where we're aware of the moments that we will be listening, the moments where we will be acting, the moments we'll be reflecting, and the moments we'll be planning. And kind of going through that cycle over and over again will create healthy expectations for all of our stakeholders and allow us to, it's not a surprise survey, it's not a reactionary one, but a more thoughtful, intentional one. And so that's, we really view that for the visionary work, the kind of annual cycle is a key element, and the survey is the essence to being able to hear thousands of voices, which we want to hear.
Thank you so much, Gopi. We now have a little bit of time for any questions or comments from the participants of the session. I've made a note of a couple of things I wanted to explore, but would anyone be interested in either sharing something from your perspective or from asking a question? There's a raise hand button at the bottom under the reactions, but you can also just ask questions via the chat. And we have a really interesting question on the kind of the golden thread that should run through this process. Imant, so with change being exponential, and there needs to be some constant element and a thread, how do you think about the kind of change or constant change, and what is the common thing throughout that?
I think that golden thread is the mindset that we take with us. So if we get aligned at the get-go and we get those key people involved and we're all with that same vision in mind and the same kind of alignment of where we're going with this. Then we can, with the actions that we do and the way that we communicate, kind of push that forward. So it's like a butterfly effect of what we're hoping to see. So maybe it does take that one little experiment, one little good example to get people on board and trust the process. And then you can start doing it again at a little bit bigger of impact, and then getting more people involved and more people on board. So I think it really is that common mindset and finding your change partners, who you're gonna do this with, and who's gonna help you along the way.
Thank you, Matt. And I love this point that change is exponential, and trust is also exponential. When people feel heard and understood and appreciated, they're far more willing to contribute in the future. And it's a process that is building on top of another. Gopi, do you have any thoughts on this element of the constant in the changing?
Yeah, just one for me. It's curiosity, just to ensure that at every stage, with the intention that Imanta is kind of outlining, to always stay open. Because if you're learning when you're hosting it, like for example, we did a massive survey and the answer was actually simple, and no one likes to fill out a survey when the answer is simple. So start with curiosity. Do we really need this? Is this going to be helpful? And those type of questions at every step. So, but I think that's, yeah, Imanta is also aligned.
Shada has raised the hand. So do you have a question or comment? What do you have?
Both. First of all, sorry for not turning on my camera. I'm driving. First of all, thanks very much to the presenter for the beautiful and inspiring presentation. Secondly, my question is if you have experience in administering these kind of surveys in developing countries, and if yes, what are the differences? And thirdly, I want to ask you to elaborate more specifically about the surveys designed for strategic planning, because I'm now in this process of facilitating strategic planning process in a couple of schools, and what would you advise me to consider in designing the surveys? Thank you very much.
Wonderful. So we have a couple of questions there. One is the global way to think about these things, and then there is how do you design strategic surveys, strategic elements. I'll pick up the first bit, and then Gopi, I'd love your input as you've worked on change management more globally. But we did a project, this would have been 2017, with the Western Cape Department of Education, and we looked at, essentially they were introducing change programs for the community, and we helped them design stakeholder feedback processes to inform them. And I must say it wasn't materially different. Some of the revelations were fascinating. The context is different. So if you are from a Western environment and you are working from a developed country perspective, and you're working with countries that have a different lived experience for the respondents, then you need to just really be mindful of the questions, and that they are framed in a way that will be relevant for the people. So for example, one of the questions we asked the pupils on the recommendation of the change management staff is, do you have a room to study? And that is actually something that not many pupils have in this particular group of schools that we looked at. And so I would just say that there are some obviously technical challenges and differences using web interfaces, but that's with mobile solutions out there, that's less of a challenge. But the main element is making sure you have people who understand the lived experience, think about what questions you ask and how you think about that. But Gopi, from your broader experience internationally, any things you want to share?
I had the privilege of doing a 2-week project in Soweto in South Africa, working with a school that was at the heart um, of that area that was facilitating education for children that really had little access to it. And we started with gathering information. But as Ernest was kind of aligning to, you go in with a lot of thought and intention of how best to respectfully invite participation and insights that are most important to you. So it was really about us coming in with our ignorance and curiosity, outlining something, but then before we go and do it, the important step for us is to check whether this would have the impact that we desire. So it's a smaller feedback loop before taking it larger, I find really helps when you're engaging in a space that you may have a different context for. Otherwise, the process is exactly the same, showing up with curiosity and desire to learn and inviting people to share openly with you in a way that can inform the best action moving forward. So that's how I'd offer an answer to that.
Thank you so much, Gopi. And Iman, for the second question, there was a question on how do you think about this in the light of a strategic development process? Do you want to share your perspective on designing stakeholder feedback around this strategic development?
Yeah, so I think in our section about designing the survey, you'll find all the nitty-gritty of how to formulate questions and what types of responses you can add to your questions. But it goes back to what it is you want to find out. So in that process of designing your survey, maybe start with all the ideas that you could possibly come up with. So, use that idea gathering opportunity, and then start organizing those topics into groups, into themes, and see how that fits into what you're trying to achieve. How is that aligning with kind of the strategic direction that you're going? And then once you've set those themes, then you can start kind of organizing them as questions that you're going to ask. And this goes back to that point that I made, that make sure that each question that you ask is going to give you an answer that you could potentially work with. So we're looking at things that are actionable, that respondents can have an opinion or a feeling about, and that it makes sense in what your big picture, big goal is.
Thank you, Amanda. One of the things that we talk a lot about is that good feedback isn't just about asking people for opinions, because everybody will have an opinion, especially when it comes to education, which I'm sure you'll have found over Christmas dinner at some point. It is most productive to ask for observations or for feelings. So people are best qualified to share what they see and share how they feel about certain things. And that's something that you can then ask in a way that informs your strategic development process, rather than just gives you additional opinions, additional kind of satisfaction indicators. And Iman said to think about the length. Your strategy is such a broad thing. Always remember that your most helpful button on the keyboard is the delete button in the end. So it is so tempting to ask those many different things, but it's about keeping it focused and targeted. So thank you for that question. We have a question from Paul on suggestions on getting benchmark data to know if you are good or bad compared to other schools or trusts, which is a frequently asked theme. While I hate doing plugs in presentations, I will mention that is one of the core points of why Edurio exists. So we exist to provide benchmarking. Now, having said that, Edurio is not for every school or trust. And so some of the other ways you can think about it is, if you think about parent feedback, there is Ofsted Parent View. We, Chatham House Rules, don't consider it to be a very good practice survey in its own right to inform strategic development. But if you think about getting some benchmark data, there's a lot of data out there. You can also think about working with other trusts in the region. So if you think about a similar framework, similar set of questions, then you can develop a local benchmark. Or if you ask questions similar to the ones we ask, all of the Edurio important research findings are published basically online for free. So if you could drop in the link to our insights page, any of our thought leadership reports can be downloaded there, and you can have a look at some of the sentiments in the country around particular topics, and you can look to replicate that. Alison has made a comment around the importance of triangulating and working with the trustees and governors. And Alison, would you mind unmuting and sharing just a little bit more of how you think about using stakeholder feedback with the trust board or the school governing bodies at Nova Education?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we have it as a standing agenda item on all of our meetings now, and all trustees and all governors have access to the reports for each of our schools and the trust as a whole. And they've found that a really useful way of actually independently being able to verify what they're hearing from leaders, because remembering they're not always the experts in the room. They come from a wide field of different organisations and different disciplines and practices. So, you know, they receive from the experts, you know, the CEO report, the head teachers report, lots of school data drawn together by experts in their field within the schools. And actually for them, sometimes they just need another voice. So yes, they can go and look at local or regional data themselves, and they can get access to other reports. They can speak to people when they're visiting, their link visit reports. But actually we've found that that stakeholder engagement data is a really rich source for them to independently verify that what they're hearing is accurate. So another tool to assure themselves.
Thank you, Alison, for sharing that. As we have just 1 minute left, there's a question from Sarah that I just wanted to quickly comment on. So how do you engage pupils well? And pupils are an interesting group because in one sense, they're the most in control of the school or trust. So many trusts say, okay, as part of this lesson, we will either have devices for the pupils, or if they're bringing their own, we'll dedicate 10-15 minutes to spend time on it. It is very, very important to think about language that is appropriate for them. When we work with multiple year groups, we have less complex questions for the younger year groups. We've also done emojis as response options. So that is something that you can do. You can do really simple questions with emojis, which will give you a little bit of insight without perhaps as much nuance. But again, pupils are, like every respondent, they care about being heard and understood. And what we've seen is, we've seen trusts create like a pupils parliament that is discussing these insights, where they see a sense for it and they see the purpose. Frequently, we communicate with the staff, or we communicate with the trustees, and we may put something on the website. Think about doing a video for the pupils, thanking them, showing that their input is appreciated, and that will see you develop that further. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Imanta, for leading this work. Thank you so much, Gopi, for advising us and sharing your perspectives. And thanks everybody for participating in this session. Your feedback would be tremendously valuable as you go through it. We will keep developing the resource, and thank you for that.